Hello, my name is Michael Lambert. Now, I've been making these videos for about 4 years now, and 2 weeks ago, I think for the first time, I made a really big mistake. I posted a video which caused a lot of upset. A lot of people got quite cross with me, and I think it ended up that over 100 people unsubscribed. And whilst I think far more people actually agreed with what I was saying than disagreed, it still seemed to upset an awful lot of people. And what I did, the sin I committed, which it appears to be unforgivable, is that I dared to criticise Keir Starmer. Now, I'm not a Labour supporter, I'm not a Conservative supporter, I'm not a Liberal Democrat supporter. I consider myself independent, and I like to be able to comment on everybody impartially as I can. And what I had to say in that video was what I felt, and I'm sorry that some people felt that they didn't want to hear any more from me because of that. But my problem is this: I think the current Labour government is really first class. I mean, if you look at the present cabinet, I mean, there's some outstanding politicians there, and I think they're doing a really good job in so many ways. And nobody could have been more pleased than I was to see the back of the previous government of corrupt, dishonest incompetence, probably the worst government we've ever had. But the problem over everything else, and we know we've got so many problems that the government has to confront, and we know what a mess the Conservatives left. The big problem is the mammoth in the cupboard, and that is Brexit. And I just cannot accept, and I never will be able to accept, Keir Starmer's attitude towards Europe. You know, he's going all around Europe. He's been to Germany, he's been to France, he's been to Ireland, shaking hands and smiling at everybody. He reminds me of somebody who's been happily married for a long time and then suddenly has a divorce, and then realises that he made a mistake and he didn't really want to divorce, and he can't really get back together because he'd lose face. But instead, he's going around shaking hands and making friends with all the former in-laws and hoping somehow that make things better. And it isn't going to work. You know, you can go and shake the hands of all 27 leaders of the various countries in the EU, but it's not going to make a difference. We're out. And he seems absolutely determined that we should stay out. And what I found absolutely forgivable, and this was really prompted me to make that video 2 weeks ago, was the fact that, you know, when the EU saw that he was making overtures and he was being friendly and so on, they immediately said, you know, how about we reinstate Erasmus, this wonderful scheme whereby students from UK universities can study in Europe and vice versa for a year. And no, he wasn't having that. Oh no, because what I think he's thinking is, what would Nigel Farage say, and what will the Daily Express say about restoring freedom of movement? He's got such a strong majority at the moment, and he's got another for nearly 5 years in office. I mean, where's the big risk in agreeing to Erasmus? And what I find also unforgivable is this is denying an opportunity to so many young people for such a good chance to experience life in another country, and to just deny it because he's worried about whatever reason. It's very sad. And we know that the inheritance that they've their inheritance from the Tories is an absolute mess. We know that the economy is in a terrible state, and we know it's going to be extremely difficult for anyone to bring it around. And of course, they keep reminding us, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, forever make us all feel gloomy by saying about how bad things are and how difficult it's going to be to sort out. We all know that there's almost certainly going to be cuts and tax increases in her budget at the end of next month. And so they're not doing much to make us feel optimistic about the future. We're just told that it's going to be difficult for the time being. And I think, I mean, there is one way, and I know it's obviously not going to happen. It's absolutely a fantasy. But I think if Starmer were to come out and say one day, look, we've had a stab at this being outside the EU, it isn't working. We're losing so much money, so much trade, and we're at such a disadvantage, and it's so difficult, and it's such a small world these days to be surrounded by bureaucratic barriers to trade, that we feel we just got to start talking about the EU, about whether or not we can negotiate some sort of deal gradually. Might take forever, but some sort of deal to get back in. into at least the customs union and single market, I think the entire nation would just rejoice and feel, for once, feel optimistic about the future, because at least it might take a long time, but at least there is something to look forward to. But right now, I mean, what are we? Where's this growth coming from? They talk about green issues, and they talk about AI and all the rest of it. Well, the whole world's involved in those issues. It's a very competitive field, and we don't have any great specialities. We don't have any great special skills. Our financial section is very good, although that's going to be hit next from the end of June onwards, when equivalence ends, which means it's going to be much more difficult to deal for financial firms to deal with the EU after that, and. What else do we have? Clotted cream, Scotch whisky. I mean, what are we going to sell to the world? We've got this new business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. I mean, is he going to go off rushing around the world? Is he going to try and build on these deals we've got all over the world with Australia and New Zealand? Is he going to go off on the CPTPP companies trying to sell stuff to Chile and Vietnam and Brunei and places? I mean, we're in a mess. And it's very, very difficult to see how we get out of it, whilst we're absolutely adamant that we're not going to get any closer to the EU than we are already, except for perhaps negotiating a better veterinary agreement, which is really very, very trivial. Now, I wanted to just talk about a few other things, and at the end, if you can bear with me, I want to talk about special economic zones, which could be the kiss of death as far as us ever returning to the EU, because it could mean that we can not even contemplate returning for 25 years. So, if you can hang on, I'll explain that at the end. Now, when I first started in business importing goods from Italy, it was very long time ago, and I was about 20 years old at the time, and it used to involve driving a lorry to Italy and collecting some goods and bringing them back again. And if a lorry, I think, was over 3 tons or something, you couldn't go through France without a permit. And to go through France, to get one of these permits, I think they only issued about 5,000 a year. It was almost impossible. So we used to have to go to either Holland or Belgium, then we go through Germany, then we go through either Austria or Switzerland into Italy. And then we'd load the van up, and once the van was loaded up, we then had to get the documentation done, and that used to take about a day. And we'd sit outside in the van for a day whilst they filled out these forms. It was called TIR, that was the system they had, and they'd come up with this huge form with hundreds of items on it and so on. And then you drive off, and you get to the Italian border and border with Switzerland, say, and then you'd have to go through the whole thing again, and you'd have to get some money from the bank because you'd have to pay a deposit for the goods that you were carrying across Switzerland in case you sold it in them, for the duty and VAT on those goods. And when you got to the other end, then you'd claim that money back, and then you'd go into Germany and you'd pay the money again for German to sort of cover any possibility of you selling the goods in Germany. And you'd do the same when you got to Holland. And so the whole thing used to take you 10 days to get back from Italy. So complicated. When you got back to the UK, you then had to fill in all these other forms to do these entries, which again often would take a day and a half, and you'd queue up with all these lorries. In those days, there was so much less traffic than there is now. Now, conversely, right now, if you want to go to Italy and get some goods, when we were members of the EU, go to Italy, load up your goods and drive back, and that was that. Nobody remotely interested. But what we are doing now is reinstating all those barriers that existed in the 70s and the 80s to trade, that made it so difficult and so complicated that we were all so pleased to see the back of. And not only that, it's making it so much less attractive for Europeans to buy from us because they get involved in all the paperwork. And we're doing it. We seem to be sort of looking for ways to make things more complicated. And I just saw 2 or 3 things this week. Fun enough, you know that the EU they're now they're introducing a visa scheme whereby you've got to go online and pay for a visa if you want to visit the EU, and it's €7 they're charging. Now that applies to people all over the world. It's not. I mean, they probably brought it in to punish us, but it's applying to everybody who's not a member of the EU. Now we've responded. We've upped that, up the ante. We're charging £10 for our visa. So any European that wants to come to the UK has to pay £10, which is equivalent to about €12 to come here. And they have to apply for a visa. And you just think this again is another reason. It's only a small reason. It's another reason to make it more difficult to come. So you're paying €12. Your family of four. That's 48, 50 euros on top of for nothing to come and visit the UK. Well, let's go somewhere else. There's got plenty of other countries to go to. It's all the time make it more difficult, make us more attractive, less and less attractive. And something else, I on the same sort of subject that I saw last week, which I just simply couldn't believe. Heathrow Airport is the fourth biggest airport in the world, 80 million passengers a year. And 30% of those passengers are in transit. In other words, they're just going through the airport. If, for example, you're coming from Dubai and you want to go to Boston and in America, and you come via Heathrow and you come with the British Airways flight, you get off it, you can go onto another British Airways flight and off to Boston. Well, now, in future, and they've already introduced this for some countries, but it will apply to the whole world in future. You will have to, if you're going to land in Heathrow, I suppose it's for wear and tear on the carpets perhaps, but anyway, you're going to have to go online and you have to provide a photograph. You have to pay £10 for what's known as a direct airside transit visa. In other words, you will need a visa to change planes in Heathrow. I mean, nobody else does this. They don't do it in Amsterdam, they don't do it in Frankfurt, they don't do it in Milan. Nobody else does it. And there are plenty of other routes from, say, the Middle East to America or wherever, without coming through Heathrow. And so this seems to me, I don't know what it is. Are we so poor that we need £10 off everybody? Need to scam £10 off everybody just changing planes in Heathrow? And think of how much money all those people would have spent in the airport, in the cafes and the shops and all the rest of it. They're going to hang around for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and they're going to just spend money because people always spend money in airports. And it just seems so absolutely crazy. And two more really crazy things on a slightly different subject. We're now spending millions apparently on filling in the sea at Dover to make Dover bigger to cope with controls, and because we're worried about the delays, and the diggers are down there and they're filling up this, that and the other, and building new concrete docks and all the rest of it. And the maddest thing of all is this, that we no doubt have imported food from Ireland, for thousands of years, at least 1,000 years, and never had any controls whatsoever. We're now spending hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, on building facilities at Holyhead for the first time ever, so that we can check food coming from Ireland to see it's safe. And you just think, this is insane. How can anybody say we've got to do all this stuff because that's what people voted for in 2016? Because that is the stock answer from any Labour cabinet minister. This is what the people voted for. People didn't know what they were voting for. People now regret how they voted, and the vast majority now think it was a mad idea and we'd be better off in the EU. But no, it's just spending money. Think of the billions and billions and billions we've spent on just making things more difficult. Now, a couple of things I saw in the paper today. Financial Times wrote an article about how government spending is unsustainable at the present levels. So, again, big problems. You see, I think the Labour Party, because they're inheriting such a mess, and because I think of this attitude towards Europe where there's no hope, I think they're going to find that their goodwill is going to run out very, very quickly. And the Tories, meantime, are just going to sit back and laugh. And, people have very short memories when it comes to politics, and people are already forgetting a lot of what the Tories did. The Tories are responsible for all this mess that Labour are going to struggle to, or not going to have a very, very big problems in resolving or even coping with. And I think public opinion is not going to last that long in favour of, or I think the benefit of the doubt is not going to last that long. People are going to get pretty angry and pretty exasperated. And then there's the question of the Evening Standard talking about us getting skilled workers, because we know that we need skilled workers, although there's a terrific opposition to any immigration, it seems, amongst many people. The Evening Standard today again say UK is falling behind in attracting skilled foreign workers as visa rules and Brexit challenge employers. Data shows that while there's been a surge in foreign interest in UK roles, the country falls behind other Western nations in attracting highly skilled workers, which is at odds with the government's current immigration policy. See, there again, if we're going to grow, we're going to need skilled, clever people. But it's just becoming so unattractive to come here. And I think at the same time, we've got... I suppose the only good thing that the Tories, that Labour can console themselves with is that the two idiots who are likely to, one of which is likely to become leader of the Tory party, will never ever get elected. We've got Honest Bob, who's allegedly a thoroughly dishonest spiv. He always reminds me of Private Walker in Dad's Army. I think he's definitely one of them. I think he'll say anything, do anything. I mean, I wouldn't trust the man an inch. And then we've got Babadook, who's as charming and as graceful as a Rottweiler with hemorrhoids. I suppose the candidate that the Labour should be most concerned about for the leadership of the Conservative Party is James Cleverly, because he's the least unreasonable of the four of them. But it seems unlikely that he's going to be elected, since it's the old biddies who belong to, who are members of the Conservative Party, who will decide, and they'll go for whoever's going to be nastiest to foreigners, because we all know that. We actually used to think it was the EU was responsible for all our problems, but now we know it's foreigners, and particularly Muslims, as Nigel Farage keeps reminding us. And speaking of Nigel Farage, obviously he's in the mind of Keir Starmer a lot of the time, I'm sure, because he represents a lot of the so-called Red Wall voters, and I suppose he's an ever-present threat. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about special economic zones, but I can see that this video is dragging on a little bit and you're probably getting a bit bored anyway. So I'll make a separate video now and I'll post at the same time about the SEZs. It's a subject which I think most people find extremely boring and are not very interested in, but it is quite important, and it does concern the possibility that once these SEZs are set up, that we may not be able to apply to rejoin the EU or even the single market or the customs union for at least 25 years. So it's something to be a bit concerned about. But anyway, I'll post that again in a few moments.